brand new.
Yeah.
Welcome one and welcome all. We're live tonight on BerryFlow Upstream number 102. It's June already, guys. Summertime, full swing. We're here on the 5th. How you guys doing? We're covering May 29th to June 5th. I'm here with our regular cast. Alex, how you doing on your end, man?
Good. Just actually sold a couple clients last week, big ones. So I'm excited. I'm in a good mood. Just been really busy and trying to figure out what's going on with BlackBerry. My Priv's been acting kind of funny, so not in a good way.
Over in Canada, we got some representation too. We got Brandon Orr. How you doing, bud?
What's up, guys? My first time doing the podcast on my balcony here. So I just got some new
Nice.
seats on my balcony, so taking advantage of it.
Yeah.
Weather's nice. I'm in a good
That's
mood.
sweet. You need like a hammock out there, bro. Just like
Yeah.
straight chilling throughout the podcast. How are you doing, Blaze, editor-in-chief over there at Crackberry?
Doing good, man. Can't complain. Nobody listens when I complain anyway.
102 episodes, guys. It just every episode past 100 now has just felt like a milestone for some reason. I don't know why, but we have a couple things I want to talk about tonight. I mean, we have some interesting news that BlackBerry is kind of working to allow updates to unlock the AT&T branded Privs that don't necessarily have an active AT&T SIM card. Alex, I know you kind of have some woes with AT&T and your Priv and OS updates and things like that. So, though this news doesn't necessarily directly affect you, how does it make you feel that at least BlackBerry's aware of kind of a bigger issue with the update cycle on, for those types of devices?
No, I think it's great that they will update non-AT&T devices in a weird. Well, it's AT&T. It's like a weird thing. So it's AT&T device, but not being used on AT&T, and it's like. I say that's absolutely great, and it is kind of their responsibility if it's their branded phone, but, I think you should prioritize updating your own damn devices first, but that's just me.
But what are you talking about, bro?
Yeah, what are you
Because
talking about, man?
that has nothing to do with AT&T. The only thing that's going on there in that respect is basically anybody who bought one of those AT&T branded devices that are unlocked.
They have no way to update, right?
They have no way to update because AT&T hasn't pushed out the update.
Yeah. No, I think
Is BlackBerry's implementation basically, circumventing the need for the carrier? Because is taking the SIM card out of my AT&T Priv going to get the update faster than having to wait for it?
No, it doesn't mean anything because technically at the core level, when you buy a device, at least in this respect anyhow, when you buy a device, that device, whether it be unlocked or locked or whatever the case, it's still, a carrier device. So,
Yeah.
If you if you buy an AT&T device and you take it and you unlock it yourself personally, it doesn't matter. It's still an AT&T device because the locking mechanism isn't the only thing that attributes it to AT&T. There's internal stuff.
Yeah, so what is it? Obviously the AT&T branded apps, and when I turn my phone on, I get the AT&T pop-up. What is it? Is there actually a piece of hardware in there making AT&T, or is it just all software modifications?
I think the updates go by IMEI number. So if they
it's an accumulation
enable
of
in
things.
the devices that were sold through those channels that weren't necessarily directly AT&T, they should be able to push the update as a.
It goes by the IMEI number. You also have a browser identification. It's just like the old days when BlackBerry used to have the BlackBerry specific identification numbers for their devices. Because remember how you used to change the themes that were loaded on certain BlackBerries? All goes back to that. But you used to be able to load the T-Mobile theme by editing the ALX files on BlackBerry devices. And you could load up the T-Mobile theme on a non-T-Mobile device. It's basically a accumulation of things that are deep within the OS and the device itself that still make it an AT&T device.
So, question then. So, say that you have one of these unlocked AT&T devices, and say you're on, I don't know, Cricket. You go and search for an update. You're going to be downloading the update through, I guess, Cricket's network, but it's going to actually have to ping AT&T servers to grab the update then?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Aren't we talking about the update? So
Yeah,
essentially,
we're talking about the update, but you're using Cricket as an example, and Cricket's probably a bad example because I'm pretty sure Cricket is part of AT&T anyways.
okay, any other carrier. Say that you're using, I don't even know,
T-Mobile or
T-Mobile.
something.
Great. Okay, it's easier. So say that you're on T-Mobile. So essentially, it's still gonna have to ping the AT&T servers, even though you're on T-Mobile, right? Because it's AT&T phone, and then
Yeah.
that's the one. And so you're
Yeah,
essentially gonna be
if you
downloading.
bought one of those cheap AT&T unlocked devices and you're using it on T-Mobile, let's say,
Yeah.
it's not even making any logical requests to T-Mobile to see if T-Mobile has an OS because it still believes that it's an AT&T device. It's asking AT&T if there's an update, but it's not getting a response back from
Yeah.
AT&T. So basically, that's what BlackBerry is at some point in time hopefully going to go ahead and change. They're going to change how those devices essentially respond to them because obviously BlackBerry knows which devices they are because they were all pushed
So
through their channel. They know which devices were assigned to AT&T through their IMEI.
So I just want to this is interesting to me. So essentially, it needs to download the AT&T because it has all the AT&T branding and all the assets and everything like that. If it were to go and download the Priv update from T-Mobile, T-Mobile would not store on their servers, AT&T branding and all this other,
Well,
internal. Is that kind of why it has to go to
it's
AT&T?
a complicated process because when the operating systems themselves all contain all the exact same information, it doesn't really matter for the most part. I'm not going to say all of them do because they don't, but everybody knows like when the Priv basically before the Priv was released, you could find files for every single carrier directly within the operating system, right? That's why the AT&T boot screen was there, the T-Mobile boot screen, the Vodafone boot screen, the Sprint boot screen, all that stuff was still within the operating system. So there are core components of the operating system that actually are fit for and basically workable upon every carrier, but there are certain things that just simply need to be directly downloaded from that individual carrier as well because of whatever specific modifications that they have made to the operating system, in terms of those apps or maybe AT&T has like a certain, I don't know, it's complicated. Maybe AT&T just basically has like certain additions to their operating system that others don't, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully,
well, I know I'm just an example from what comes off the top of my head. I think RCS, like the advanced text messaging, like some Samsung devices have it. If like you're on AT&T with certain Samsung device, someone else's Samsung device, and that's like totally a carrier-enabled feature built into the OS. So
yeah.
I'm assuming like that might be one of the things, for example. But I guess at the end of the day, I just feel like it's broken. I think everyone feels that it's broken. That I should be able to just. Yeah, like let me download the bulk of the OS, like the update, and then like separately AT&T like send me over the modifications. But maybe that's not even possible, or I don't know.
But really, that's not something that BlackBerry is going to be able to go ahead and fix either because there's too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to that.
It's totally the carriers. I don't mean to blame it on BlackBerry in the slightest, but I guess
I just wonder, will this kind of update work for us on the opposite end who are diligently, patiently waiting for the update with a legit AT&T device on legit AT&T service? Will I have to end up using this? It gets me because like the autoloaders go out once it drops for the carrier. It just hasn't dropped for AT&T yet, so we don't have any kind of autoloader or any manual means to go get the update either, which kind of sucks too. Especially as we're going to talk a little bit later about some outlying updates that are already coming down the pipe for Marshmallow. So some people are getting some of those updates early and things like that, and we have a maintenance Marshmallow update coming too. So it really makes you kind of wonder what else there is out there for us. Brandon, how are you feeling on your end, man? Are the updates killing you on BlackBerry 10?
It's been a while since I've seen one of those. I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I figured as a developer you would have gotten down on that 10.3.3 beta.
You know what? I'm at the point
that Crackberry uncovered for us.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything new in that? I mean, the thing that got me to load leaks and a bunch of other OSs back in the day was just the fact that it had some new functionality, some actual interesting new functionality. I'm not sure really what 10.3.3 is going to bring, and maybe you guys can shed some light on that. There's some cool things that it adds. Yeah, sure, I'd load it. Just at this point, I'm not sure. I'm not expecting anything crazy to come with it. So if I'm wrong, I'll load it. But
It's not worth it. At least not at this point, because you can downgrade.
Yeah, to be honest, it's kind of all jaded about the whole thing now. It's kind of like I got that frame of mind where it's like the device is good and it's good for what I need it for, so I'm happy with it. But it's nowhere near the same type of excitement I had when 2 years ago when BlackBerry 10 was coming out with updates regularly and things like that. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think the topics, the things that you guys are talking about with AT&T, I mean, I talked about it briefly before the show, where it's kind of like, and I think we've mentioned it a number of times on this podcast, but it still blows my mind that, you need a company to okay the fact that you can get an update from the actual phone manufacturer for your device. I mean, that's completely ludicrous. Like, when you buy a laptop, you don't have to get permission from Rogers or from Time Warner to allow an update for your device. You don't need permission from Time Warner to allow you to download an update for your Fitbit or anything. So I think it's completely ludicrous that they kind of lock this out and make it dependent on them to allow these updates. I almost think there's something fundamentally wrong with that. I mean, you paid for the device, you paid for the company to support that device, and if these companies are preventing you from getting that support for that device, I mean, it's not right. And I mean, they like the argument I always hear from telcos is that, oh, they just want to ensure that the device works well on the network. And it's like, well, yeah, I can understand that from one perspective, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I'm pretty sure these manufacturers wouldn't be loading an update that would diminish the functionality of the device on a cellular network. I mean, since they rely so heavily on data and that type of functionality for most of the things they have now, right? I don't know, maybe you guys can shed some more light on that aspect of why they block these updates.
Because they're assholes, duh.
I almost don't want to talk about it because it's making me depressed. Like, I'm here waiting on an OS update. I don't know if it's Marshmallow. I don't know if it's 10.3.3, but I'm waiting and waiting, and nothing's coming, right? I have 10.3.3 loaded on a developer device, and it works well, but it's not a full OS. Really, you can dig through the Crackberry forums threads on 10.3.3 beta to see what's out there.
Are there any new features? Like
there's some Easter eggs. Yeah, there's stuff in the browser, and but it's minimal stuff. There's some system backend stuff that has changed, but we don't see it on a user level. So some things are working in a little bit more succinctly, and synergistically with the old system as they're supposed to. But a lot of that stuff on the back end is not even here yet on the device. I feel like this was something they didn't really plan to announce per se. It just kind of got out. Like, again, Crackberry put out the news as someone was talking about it in the forums, and then BlackBerry came out with an actual blog post about it, following that, what this OS is and what we, really put it out there for you guys to use. In the blog article themselves, they mention the fact that, there's really nothing new in terms of APIs or support on that particular OS build. And John Chen has told us it's about NIAP certification for the 10.3.3 device. I think if there's going to be any Easter eggs or anything additive, it's going to be on 10.3.4, if anything, and really maybe updates within applications, but maybe some new security features, right? I can see them doing something like that, adding in another layer here or there, making everything a little bit more uniform, for their enterprise purpose. Blaze, did you see anything, as reading through that people were excited or concerned about? I definitely want to put as kind of like a little warning out there. This is a beta, OS build. If you're going to go put it on a device, make sure it's a device you don't want to revert back or has any data that you're going to lose.
Make sure you put it on a device that you can actually stand using 10.3.3 in a beta form until the actual version comes out.
Right. Like, I did not put it on a daily driver. I don't think it's capable of doing that for anyone. For instance, I can't even set a wallpaper on it because there's no file management system, which kills a lot of the other peripherals. So again, it's a very beta type of offering, so not really something good for a device. And in terms of that, to answer your question, there's not much there, Brandon. And I don't know how that makes you feel. I think we're going to get like some subtle refinements, things like that on the back end in terms of performance and stuff like that, which is honestly not a bad thing either, right? If they could make BlackBerry 10 bug-proof or as close to as possible,
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to stay solid for years to come. But nothing too major, right? Very small things that are,
Yeah, it almost kind of feels like a service pack, right? It's something that needs to be done to kind of flatten out and iron out some of the remaining bugs, kind of just update the security type of things, but it's nothing that's really outward facing that's going to change very much.
With BlackBerry pushing like a maintenance update for their OS, I wonder if developers are going to come back and push maintenance versions of their apps. It's sad, right? We laugh about it, but it's a genuine concern some people have. I know there's some apps in BlackBerry world that just don't work anymore. And it's a good app, people paid for it, but because the platform isn't really growing, a lot of those apps are becoming abandoned, and now we have crazy third parties coming in trying to fill voids that shouldn't exist, right? How do you feel about Penguin, man? I have it downloaded here. I still use it on occasion.
Well, it's one of those things where I've gotten emails of people asking, like, I kind of feel bad because I am kind of just people, not standoffish, just people are asking for updates to fix some bugs in the applications. I mean, fully, I can completely sympathize with them, but at the same time, to actually dig up the code and fix some of these bugs, like, first off, I have to debug the app to figure out where the bug is exactly, and just the amount of income I derive from the application, like the fact that BlackBerry hardly ever changes the featured applications on their app store is a bit of like a smack in the face. It's like, what incentive is there to, improve your application at the moment? There really isn't. I mean, they're not selling more devices. They're not trying to get more people on the devices. I mean, as much as I sympathize, and I really do, with the people who download my app, and I really appreciate it. I mean, without them, my app, wouldn't have had the longevity that it's had. A lot of the features I've added on my application have been through useful feedback from users, and like I said, as much as I sympathize with them, just the value proposition for sinking in time in my apps to update them and refresh them, it just isn't there for me personally, because I'm not one of those alpha kind of level developers like Nemery or something like that. So for someone like Nemery, who probably still generates a decent income, for him the value proposition is probably a lot greater than for what I would imagine the majority of BlackBerry 10 developers are. And I've spoken to other developers, and I mean, unanimously, all the developers I talk to feel bad about the situation. Like, they want to update their apps. It's just it's just not. It's kind of harsh to say, but it's just not worth it to update your app at this point. And it's a horrible thing to say, and I truly do love the platform.
I want to hear Alex's excuse.
Yeah. No, it's the same thing. I mean, luckily, like, I haven't had anyone complain to me that there are bugs, aside from James. You just screwed around with me because, like, the settings, or no, not even the settings. Like, the introduction when you first install the app, you slide left and it kind of explains, how to use the app and what features it has. Only on the Z10, it's a little bit wider, so it looks goofy, but you never see that screen ever again after you start using the app. So it's not a big problem, and that's what James likes to give me crap for, but luckily, I haven't really had people asking for fixes. Maybe like one person has asked for something, but exactly what Brandon's saying. I don't even have the client installed on my computer right now. So for me to go in and make a modification, or for me to maybe go fix a feed that doesn't exist anymore, I would have to, just the amount of work that would maybe allow me to make $10, $15, $20 in app sales, of which 30% goes to BlackBerry. Like, it's just not worth the time. And realistically, it's not about, like, I guess there's saving face too. Like, say that I was going to develop another app for BlackBerry 10, you want to be known as the developer that, like, supports his apps and things like that. But realistically, as BlackBerry is obviously not pushing much towards BlackBerry 10, do I really want to save face for being that developer on BlackBerry 10? I don't really think BlackBerry 10 users are going to go over to Android and be like, oh, that guy, he did not support his BlackBerry 10 app all that well, because, like, we did. Brandon and I, we supported our app very well when we were doing it, but there's a life cycle with it, and it's just over. So I don't know.
Blaze, from your perspective, do you think there's an opportunity on BlackBerry 10 for developers to continue to innovate and do new things? So, for instance, we saw an application at BlackBerry World called Just 10, and it's a very private social network, allows you to invite in 10 people. Launched natively on BlackBerry 10, is going to other platforms as well. I mean, is it BlackBerry 10's viability that's keeping developers away? Because I think you guys all genuinely feel it's a nice platform to develop for, right? In terms of the tools and the different resources you have for developing. And there's so many different OSs, like Ubuntu as well, that is using the QML kind of base plus C objective to actually go out and do those coding. So I wonder if there's and I direct this at you, Blaze, is there opportunity for people to develop and innovate on BlackBerry 10 and then bring that maybe to other platforms? An example I think of is, an enterprise type of application, something in that realm of things where you can bring it over and then expand it from there. Or do you really
I think there's room when it comes to like enterprise applications and stuff like that, because enterprise applications are, one of those things that are constantly growing, and for better or worse, they're constantly changing as well, because everybody's, trying to work behind the firewall and all of that stuff. I just think that when it comes to, consumer applications, we sort of hit like a wall in terms of consumer applications, because it seems now as though all of the, I don't want to say all because that's not right, but a lot of the developers that do remain on BlackBerry 10 are just concentrating on filling voids in the system, like creating Instagram applications and Facebook applications and stuff for Google Plus, stuff like that is honestly missing from the platform, but maybe isn't necessarily needed either. Nobody has, aside from 2 or 3 developers, have gone ahead and actually come up with something new or something innovative for the platform itself. Again, it just goes back to filling the voids, like WhatsApp. What's going to happen when WhatsApp disappears? Are we going to start seeing like 10 different WhatsApp apps that are maybe not as good?
BlackBerry's going to push a web version that also doesn't work of WhatsApp. Just send this to WhatsApp's website and hope it works.
I mean,
and say that this is WhatsApp's compromise to us.
Yeah.
One developer that obviously he's sort of thinking outside of the box when it comes to a lot of his applications is Roger LeBlanc.
Yeah.
He always comes up with creative solutions that are
stuff that should be built into the OS,
Yeah, like he works with the operating system, and a lot when BlackBerry 10 was coming up, a lot of the developers at that point in time, that's what they were doing as well, is working within the operating system to fill holes within the operating system to improve it. But now we've moved on beyond that. It seems into basically filling the holes within the ecosystem itself, rather than actually just utilizing what is there as the core operating system and working with that. And that's a shame, because I always enjoyed the applications that improve the user experience at the operating system level more than something like an Instagram client or something like that. Yeah, it's cool. A lot of people will appreciate it, but it's it's kind of like basic at that point.
I'm happy with what I got. I mean, I have the actual Instagram and iGrand Pro working fine. I agree with you, Blaze, in terms of the deficit that is there and developers coming in to fill it. I also think that more developers would care more. Maybe Alex and Brandon wouldn't feel so detached from the ongoings if BlackBerry was better at communicating what the path is, right? And this is something we harp on them quite a bit about on this podcast, right? That them not being vocal with what their desires and wishes are. But I think more developers would at least feel that there is something to continue to latch onto if BlackBerry laid out what the vision was, or even, at least saying where the vision isn't, But it's very kind of vague, the message that we get from them. So for developers to really, really want to be there, it seems like, as Brandon he touched on this a little bit, that a lot of the developers that are there are almost there on like a pity stake, where they're the ones keeping the platform alive.
Yeah.
So, Alex, did you look at this
Yes.
new developer hero program and tell
Yeah.
us some of your thoughts? I know, Brandon, you have some of yours as well.
Yeah.
That'll kind of transition us forward here. Again, at this time where they're really not communicating well on what the point is of BlackBerry 10 as it continues on, this
Yeah.
developer hero program to showcase your apps, does it have any value for you?
No, I mean it was a weird thing to kind of see because there was definitely a point in time when BlackBerry got the Amazon App Store on there, and then they were actually trying to push BlackBerry 10 developers to develop Android apps. It's like you get the best of both worlds now. You could have it on Android and within Amazon App Store, and like there's this whole like push away from BlackBerry apps, and then all of a sudden, the platform's kind of backed off. They haven't been updating it, and then boom, here's new. They're trying to showcase new things, and I was reading into it, and it has to be a new native app, so either WebView or Cascades, and like I'm like, really? So like this is almost like them trying to push new developers on board when they've like pretty much already pushed them away. Like they verbally and through their actions have pushed developers away, and now it's like they're trying to pull them back. Like it's confusing.
Yeah, it's definitely it definitely is a bunch of mixed signals coming from BlackBerry. The other thing that I find kind of interesting is that the prize essentially, if you come up with a new app, is that they get you featured on the BlackBerry App Store. But I'd be surprised to see some of the statistics that they have internally on BlackBerry World Store interactions.
This episode is now retitled Black Store.
Yeah, I have to imagine that the interaction levels have gone down considerably, and so that even if you do get your app featured on the BlackBerry Store, I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be a boon to like a humongous boon to your downloads or even income revenue.
No, I mean, like, are people checking daily anymore?
Yeah,
like when there are constant new apps.
The BlackBerry Store, and goodness knows how long, and
you
I
use
don't know.
BlackBerry 10.
Yeah, I don't know many people who have BlackBerry 10s who do check their store other than for updates. So,
and too, like when I was on BlackBerry 10 and I would check the stores, featured, sometimes featured would change, but normally it would revert back to its like here's the normal, like BlackBerry Travel would be on there. There'd be all these these apps that are always on there.
They keep apps. They've been keeping apps there since the very beginning of BlackBerry 10. They don't rotate them. Like the Despicable Me game is still on there. It's like, dude, come on. Like
that doesn't help them.
That app hasn't been updated since it released. Like that, and that's just another thing that just slaps developers in the face. You got people like Roger LeBlanc and other people who work hard to put their apps on the platform, and then you have these other joke of apps on the platform who've been featured for 3 years now, and you're not giving, and they don't need the revenue. You need these other developers who are actually getting you people, people on the platform actually providing them functionality. You need those people to be featured so that they continue to develop apps. Disney doesn't care for BlackBerry 10. They're not going to keep developing apps for BlackBerry 10 at this point.
My question is, who put Crackberry on the great apps for BlackBerry list?
No, but exactly what Brandon's saying. I mean, realistically, it also trains people to stop. Like I remember back when BlackBerry 10 first came out, I'd open up BlackBerry World every couple days and I'd skim through the featured and be like, oh, this is interesting, whatever. But then I got to the point where every time I check, it's the same apps, and then it's like I just stopped looking at it. So
literally the same apps.
Yeah, I mean, you're hurting the entire ecosystem by not changing it up.
It's either the same apps or it's always when you go and you scroll into the new apps list, it's like a flood of nothing but map apps that you will never use.
Despicable Me is still there on the front page.
Yeah,
Brandon was right.
Yeah, and this really pissed me off is that my app, actually my description of my app, because it said you can view your locations on Google Maps. They didn't allow my app at first because it said that, and then they've had this app like BMap Pro that in their banner says Google Maps integration right on the front of BlackBerry World, and it's been there for 3 years, and there's no problem with that, right? But because mine says it in the description, they flagged it and prevented it from being uploaded. And so I showed them, well, this thing has it, and they eventually allowed it on. But I mean, it's just like things like that. It doesn't that just like upsets developers, you know? It's just like the inconsistencies.
I'm gonna send some emails and we're gonna get you featured just to see how much more money you make that quarter.
No, but I mean it's not even me. I mean like it's the developers who actually still like maintaining their apps and putting their apps out there. I think those people should be featured. And based on what I see on the app world, I don't believe that they are being featured. And it's sad, you know?
I want web design cheat sheet on the front page so bad. Like, let me tell you. I'm wondering when Blaze is going to update his app. I saw him with a red LE, and I'm wondering what's going on.
I'm waiting on new APIs.
Yes, exactly, right? So, yeah, not much new with 10.3.3 so far. Beta build, don't load it. Developer program, be a hero, save BlackBerry 10. Let's talk about these BlackBerry Enterprise Mobility Forums across cities in North America. Kind of interesting, kind of a roadshow type thing. Operators going around hosting these different forums, talking about what their EMM solutions are and what they really can offer. I think having these little sessions allows you at least to get with partners in the area and the region and then start building up your brand presence. And I think that's a good thing at the very least, right? What are some of you guys' thoughts?
I think that they've pretty much done them before in the past. I don't know how many people actually attend them. That would be something that I would be interested in actually learning. But they've done them in the past before across different areas, and it seems as though that they always generally stick to like some smaller areas. They go to Houston and Pittsburgh, and a lot of them happen in Ontario. Like they always hit up Toronto because it's right in their backyard. But I'd be interested in seeing how many people actually go to them and how many people participate in them. I've never actually been to one myself because they've never brought one here. Into Halifax to be able to go to one. So
I can maybe shed some light on this just because I've been not necessarily mobility forums, but I've been to one or two enterprise events held by BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And they do get a pretty good turnout just because the way I imagine it works, which is probably similar to other industries, is that you have people from companies that show up to keep a pulse on what the industry is doing, keep tabs on the new technology to see if it fits right with their enterprise needs and stuff like that. So I think attendance is probably fairly good. It's just whether the return on that investment in doing these forums pans out for them, whether those attendances or attendees translate into products being purchased, like new enterprise solutions,
accounts
for companies,
being
right?
created.
And I mean, I'm sure they have a way of, lining that up based on, figuring out what company people are representing when they show up and seeing if that company signs up in the next couple of months or so. But we don't have that information. But based on my, on the ground experience of viewing it, attendance for the very least, at the very least, it seems to be fairly good.
Attendance is good. There's a cash bar on site. No, it's one of those things where
they get the free breakfast though too. I mean, like no one's gonna pass that up.
Yeah, people are gonna partake. Any excuse to get out of the house to stretch your legs, I'm down for it. And
someone did say that this time around though that they weren't going to as many areas. I don't know if that was just something that was like maybe they just didn't plan it out to be a broader program at this point, or
yeah, there were only like 4 or 5 locations max.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a big, tour or anything. So again, if they have lined up partners for these different events, they're very focused. And if you look at the region kind of span that they're looking at, it may be an untapped market for them, or a market that may be good. After the acquisition and merger, maybe that's a place Good was doing well, and they want to kind of again show that BlackBerry face in some of those places. We don't know what Good's mechanism had. In and of itself for different industry type events and things to go to. So, BlackBerry hosting these forums is, I think, a really good thing to keep their brand out there and integrate with others, which is always going to be important. Let's talk about this interview with Alex Thurber. I found it really interesting, probably the most interesting thing I read all week. Talking about inside BlackBerry's device smartphone channel strategy. really kind of going in as to what that strategy is going to be like in terms of bringing these devices to market. It was kind of an interesting interview because it wasn't written basically like, a back
It
and
wasn't
forth
written
type.
like an interview.
Right, it was almost like an expose type write-up, really kind of sat you down in Alex's point of view and, as to what they're going through. So really, I thought some of the information to glean here was that, at least right now, they're doing differently than what they have before. Instead of kind of going down the old routes and trying to kind of recarve, the old trenches, they're trying to do things differently and reach out in new ways to try to reach these customers. And I think, people are starting to slowly get on board with what BlackBerry has to offer now, especially as Priv goes through a lot of certification and things of that nature on the security side. They're bringing it to these third parties and vendors that are then pushing out these products and solutions. So really working again to partner and integrate with others so that they can get these devices out. In terms of a channel sales strategy, what else do you guys think they can do? I'm going to post a link in here so you guys can skim through. Really just some interesting things. I wonder right now kind of why BlackBerry is in love with Cisco veterans, that they just want to pull so many over. And in this article, it kind of breaks it down for you where, Carl is looking to fill this type of position to see things, and he goes and asks someone he knows, right? Alex from, where he worked with at Cisco. So he's like, I know we work well together. I know we want to get this done. So really kind of like a tight-knit team. And John Chen seemed to be really big on that when he first came over.
I think just based on John Chen's background at SAP, aren't SAP and Cisco kind of competitors in similar spaces? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I wouldn't say all the way. I think they have a little bit of product overlap, but not a large
So that's
portion.
what I'm saying. I mean, like Cisco is probably more familiar. Like the people coming from Cisco are probably more familiar in terms of how they work and kind of the culture that they're used to. That's something that's more familiar to John Chen than bringing people over from, say, Google or Apple or something like that, right? Who that might have more of a mobile kind of experience to them. I think John Chen, as we've seen, has been trying to position BlackBerry into a more of a software company, and I think he's trying to leverage these other technologies that Cisco certainly has a foothold in, such as IoT and things like that. And I think it's just a strategic move to bring people over from those companies, and I think it's those people align well with the future kind of path that John Chen has put the company on.
Right, which goes back to software. I think one of the things that, and I don't know if John Chen's this type of guy. We've seen him axe people that he was very close with back from the Sybase days, right? We've seen him, John Sims, bye-bye, didn't get the job done type, handling there. So I wonder if right now people take a job at BlackBerry and they're like, I got to hit the ground running and I got to make this happen. Or is that the kind of mentality going in, do you think? Or do you think it's a little bit more fostered in terms of, kind of coming into the corporate culture? I know in this editorial, in this interview, Alex is like, it was a lot of information to process kind of right from the jump, like really looking at the numbers and being able to analyze the trend and do the analysis to find where the benefits were. So do you guys think it's just, like, as you said, easier working with someone you already know?
It's probably a little bit easier, at least in terms of like knowing exactly how their guidelines are going to work out and how they work on a daily basis. But at the same time, not every job can be related to another job. You know what I mean? I think anybody coming into BlackBerry from the outside is going to sit down and have a really thoughtful process in determining whether or not that is something that they want to do, because of the fact that BlackBerry, they're getting their stuff straight, but there's still that sentiment that they're on their way out the door, right? I know if I was moving to a job to BlackBerry, I'd be sitting down and thinking, okay, well, what's your process? What's your strategy? How long are you going to be here? Especially if it was a high-paying job, right? And I think one of the key things that I took away from this article is that, like, they said that Thurber wanted in because of what he saw at BlackBerry and everything like that. But in order to be able to go ahead and make a career move at that point in time, he had to believe in BlackBerry's research and development, and they conclude that statement by basically saying that we've got a great roadmap over the next year or so. So obviously, there's he sat down, he thought about it, he looked at the roadmap, and he's like,
on the gaming.
yeah, this is something that I want to be involved in, and the numbers sort of add up in his mind, and if he's still there in a year or two, then we'll know how well he played out, right?
And also, we got to think as well of Ralph Penny, who also came over, Chief Operating Officer and GM for devices. I was back on May the 9th. Again, that was someone they brought up internally from Paratech. I believe he was like VP of like radio frequency tech at BlackBerry, the RFTs. And again, that was someone they brought up from the inside. Now, having to work with someone brought in from the outside, it maybe realigns and structures BlackBerry a little bit internally as well from kind of a C-level executive perspective. So John Chen seems to be managing everything pretty well so far. We're looking for results, and that's kind of where we're going to end our discussion here, gentlemen. Really focusing on where BlackBerry can go next. We have some numbers that we're expecting to see. Now, I want to cover some of our patron questions here to close out because they kind of play into that outward perspective for BlackBerry. One of the questions that we got today, which I thought was pretty interesting, was there's a lot of discrepancy between the timing on John Chen hitting this hardware sales number and then what is going to contribute to that sell-through. Are we going to see an uptick in Priv sales on the enterprise side that help them hit that mark for device profitability, or are we going to see it somewhere else? Are these mid-range devices going to have enough time to really come together and bring a full solution? So one of the pieces is, when do we think as the hosts that BlackBerry is going to be in terms of profitability? Will they be profitable by September? And if, as John Chen tracks, that's when the business is going to be at least break even or above into a profitable place? And do you guys honestly think that they're going to be able to hit that, or whether it's going to take them till the end of fiscal 2016 in 2017 to actually, ascertain whether this business market's coming together for them?
The financials are getting better. I mean, the cuts they've made in terms of their operational costs are fairly good. The thing is that they've made some acquisitions, and so that cut into their cash reserve. So it's really going to determine on whether these new acquisitions, they can leverage them and make a good kind of return on these investments they made in these acquisitions. And I think based on what I've seen in this show, kind of just a outside view of it, it looks like some of these acquisitions were fairly good. I mean, Ad Hoc, that's been in the news fairly recently for a bunch of different things that's been used for. So from somebody who might be a potential investor looking at it from the outside in, it looks like for the most part these acquisitions are doing work for them. They're not things that they purchase or they buy and then you never hear about them after. So I mean that's one positive about it. Yeah, like previously, right?
Movertu, what? Cloud phone, what? It's funny because I just went through and uploaded all of the Upstream episodes over to SoundCloud. So I actually got to listen to some of the old ones, and if you play the episode number 1 versus episode 101, the difference is incredible, and it's kind of funny. That first one was intense. Although our last one was intense with Chris just hopping on in the middle too, which is pretty funny. I hope he got his headphone jack sorted out.
Yeah, I hope he didn't bust it.
So Alex, let's tell everyone about some of the backend changes that we've done with the podcast, moving it over to SoundCloud. What does that mean for people listening, and what do we hope to get out of it?
So the main kind of scenario that we were in is we were hosting all of the podcast episodes on BerryFlow.com. So looking at the way that a lot of more premium podcasts are doing it, they totally store them on a separate server. So if anything happens to the website, the podcast doesn't go down. And realistically, there are some services that just give a better user experience and analytics and things like that. So we wanted to get it off internal. So we were looking at a few solutions, and there's this large podcast company startup. They got funded for like $50 million. They're called Gimlet, and they went the route. They're a brand new kind of place, and they went the route of putting everything on SoundCloud. So I was looking a little bit in more to that, and it seems like a pretty nice avenue to go down. SoundCloud recently has been pushing podcasts a little bit more. So we tried that out, and James painstakingly went through and uploaded every single episode from beginning to end. We kind of had a little bit of back and forth at one point because it's a lot of work. So I don't know if he expected me to do it or if he was going to do it, and then it was like he just went and did it though. So awesome on him. I'm stoked about
James
it.
expected you to do it, but you were slacking on your pimping, so he had to go ahead and take care of business.
Exactly. So no, it's cool because like right now on SoundCloud, like right now we have 72 followers on this new account. So some of you guys have definitely started following, and James went and broke it up into different seasons, which is nice as well. So essentially, you can see that we're on season 7 at the moment, and
Another piece is that it's a little bit more streamlined for Blaze, who doesn't have to go grab the specific MP3.
Yes.
He just embeds the audio, and now audio can do streaming and download in one place. So on the website, you guys are going to have a much better experience. Everything's more consolidated, easy. What's cool for those who use SoundCloud and who actually know what it's about is you can do timed comments on the actual audio file. So you can comment and then put it at whatever time you heard Brandon make a bad joke and be like, wow, Brandon, terrible joke.
No, and I think we're going to be paying attention to the comments a lot more. The old way that we had it, it was, I mean, we had like a little bit of a mix-up on the website, and then all of a sudden the analytics was saying that we were getting like 10,000 views on an episode, and it was just totally messed up. So realistically, for us moving forward,
that was my bad.
we need to have an idea of how many listeners we have, and that'll just help the podcast grow in the future. So. Looking forward to this, seeing how this goes, and we are paying for this now, though, so keep that in mind that it's a little bit more expensive per month, but we're doing it for you guys to get a better experience, and hopefully it helps the podcast at the end of the day. So we're excited about it.
Absolutely. BerryFlow can go down, and the site and the podcast rather will continue to be functional and accessible for everyone. So even if I stop paying Alex for the hosting.
Is this the ultimate plan? Like you just want to stop paying me for hosting?
That's what it is. No. It's definitely increased cost, but our patrons support us every month. Yeah. So anything we can do to give back to them and to the entire listener, volume out there and demographic, it's worth it. And I think the analytics and everything else, everything's a little more streamlined, easier for everybody.
Should I download all the files just in case?
And I mean, we do this because we enjoy doing this. I mean, we like chirping on each other, having a good time, discussing BlackBerry, discussing the mobile space in general. And a lot of the comments that you guys make and a lot of the questions you guys ask out there, our patron supporters and everybody on the channels and everything, they ask a lot of thought-provoking questions that it leads to some good discussions, and it's an enjoyable time being on this show. So we look forward to continuing it in the future.
Yep, and just a heads up to anyone, I think tonight after this we're going to be trying to flip the switch over to use the new RSS feed. So you may experience a few problems, but we'll try and get it working properly, and then at that point, moving forward, you could download the SoundCloud app, listen to us through there, any podcast app, listen through there, or if you want to go directly to the site, you can listen through the embed, or YouTube. You pretty much have as many options.
Download the raw file if you want to do that too.
Yeah, so
it'll be much easier for you, more organized, and you'll have basically a listenable archive instead of an archive just with a bunch of links to the actual episodes, which is kind of annoying. So
hopefully it'll stop crashing the BlackBerry app on Android because there is no MP3. What was happening there for those who I answered it in the comments on the last podcast, but basically the app is set up so that it's designed to find the MP3 at a specific place. But where we were hosting the files on BerryFlow is obviously not that specific space. So anytime that you went and tapped on it and tried to play it within the BlackBerry app on Android, it would cause it to crash because it was an unexpected event happening, right? The file wasn't there, so it didn't know what to do. It panics and it just quits the app. Hopefully with the move to SoundCloud, that should obviously no longer be an issue because, one, it's not looking for the MP3 because there is technically no MP3. It's just an embed at that point.
Yeah.
And two, it's no longer hosted on BerryFlow anyway, so it shouldn't even really appear for us. So hopefully that will correct that issue.
And we should also, one thing is we were only able to see like the past 25 or 30 episodes. In theory, hopefully, once we move to this, it should show all the history so you can go back and listen to 5 minutes of episode 1 before getting the hell off of whatever you're doing because you're like, what is going on? And the last thing I have to say is...
That's how the first 8 episodes they were all like, what is going on?
And Jeff, no, the move to SoundCloud will probably not help me get a girlfriend. Jeff from the chat, sorry about that. I know that'd be pretty awesome, but
I put it on my Facebook and it got no love. So apparently it's a terrible move. I just want to read through some of the comments and questions here. We talked about most of them, but I want to just give these people a shout out. We don't normally let our general channel subscribers give us any input onto the actual podcast because there's normally so much that they can tell us. But we have some, more talks on possible specs of 2 Android phones, BB10 still alive and kicking, maybe some Passport SE talk, seeing that it's BlackBerry 10's big flagship. What are some of our expectations for 10.3, just security or a couple Easter eggs for users? Talking a little bit about, do you think BlackBerry would do well at creating the next Nexus device in 2017? I feel like if the full disk encryption was on, I wouldn't. Please make it an user-determined option. Did they actually go ahead and make it default on Marshmallow? Is it default on? I know there were talks about that back in like October.
I think so.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
That'll be interesting. I think really it's going to be good on Marshmallow, the Priv.
Yeah,
not to pull that conversation back up, but
also, I don't understand the questions about BlackBerry. Like everybody's like, BlackBerry should build a Nexus. Well, BlackBerry doesn't get to decide to go ahead and build a Nexus device. You get
I don't think there's a line you can get in to beg to be a Nexus maker.
No, and the more that Aria kind of goes its path, I wouldn't be surprised if the Nexus line eventually will just be an internal Google thing. They might eventually be taken internal, but I don't know.
And everything that BlackBerry, when it comes down to it, everything that BlackBerry is doing is sort of like going against everything, which the Nexus line is about anyways.
Yeah. So it's like more open really and
it open, stock Android, and it just
can
really
still
doesn't
do
do it. Yeah, they could do it, but again, they would have to be asked in order to do it. But
yeah. I think it's pipe dreams, but it's fun to think about. I think all of us would be pretty stoked by that, but probably not going to happen. So
Lee asks an interesting question here. One of the things that was mentioned was that BB10 was stuck on with Android 4.3. What do you think it would take for BlackBerry 10 to update to Android 5.1? Now, this is in terms of the runtime. Now, something I see a lot in Crackberry forums, Blaze, maybe you see this too, is a lot of people making the assumption that because BlackBerry went to Android, they can no longer update BB10 in terms of the runtime, where really there's nothing else to update to anymore.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, they changed when they made the jump. When Google made the jump from Jelly Bean basically up to like Lollipop, there's probably some back-end scenarios there where they can't really go ahead and build it, but it's not necessarily because like Google came out and said no, you can't do this anymore. It's more along the lines of like the technical compatibilities to be able to go ahead and implement that just aren't really in play at this point in time. Like who at BlackBerry would go ahead and work on that? I mean, it's not as if you're moving from like Android 4.2 to 4.3 or anything like that. That's a big jump, and it would take a really big undertaking to be able to go ahead and even transfer the Android runtime to a new version. And even then, you're not going to go from like 4.3 to like Marshmallow because that would just be kind of crazy at that point. Like, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen.
The implementation that they have on the BB10 version also is a Dalvik VMware basically, and they moved to an ART, a more core runtime environment. in the
Yeah,
next.
I was trying to avoid that because the ART is kind of like what we as BlackBerry users refer to as the Android runtime. But
Right.
that is the other underlying issue. The core operating system has changed. Like like you said, they moved from Dalvik to ART at that point. So it really does require a whole rewrite of the whole system. So.
Yeah, it would take basically an entire rewrite, and again, there's no return on it at this point for BB10. But a very interesting kind of thought-provoking piece. Edwin asked, "Are you actually going to put this show on as scheduled to compete with the NBA Finals?" And I said, "Yes, of course." What? Of course we're going to. Any news on upcoming devices, upcoming M maintenance releases? I do believe we talked last episode about a Priv maintenance release that was coming down the pipe shortly. Yep. What would BB10 look like today if 10.0 ran 10.3? If they released the original BB10 with the runtime that we have now, would things be different? I think it would be different, but it would still require BlackBerry like getting off their ass and executing.
Yeah.
I think when they brought the Amazon App Store onto BlackBerry 10, they shot developers in the foot, themselves in the face, and from there it disintegrated, right? Because developers are going to see even less opportunity to a degree, depending on what kind of app they built. So they invested so much in one type of app, and then you tell them to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
It kind of kills the overall drive to grow the operating system. So
and that has been the mention for like as long as it has been going on. Like, go ahead, build Android apps because put them in the App Store. But now all of a sudden with the new developer program, they're like, build BlackBerry 10 apps, and developers are kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
You've been telling us for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years now, to build Android apps. So why should we build BlackBerry 10 apps again?
Yep.
Build some, guys. If someone builds me an app of just like my face, native, web view, whatever you need, HTML5, whatever they're accepting, you will be my hero. That's
I was waiting to hear some money or something. I was actually getting pumped about it, but being your hero. Oh,
yeah, right. You would never pull out the IDE anyway, so
that's true.
Yeah. We're gonna wrap this up in our after show tonight. We're gonna be having a little bit of a conversation extension off of what Alex and I talked about over BBM. Should Slack really be worth more than BlackBerry? That'll be in our after show.
Take it easy, guys.
Peace. We'll catch you guys next week. Next week is going to be June the 12th. That's 103 for us. That means that on June 19th, we are doing our downstream. So catch that in about 2 weeks' time. It's, again, our yearly drinking game to celebrate 1 year of the podcast. But you guys take it easy. Have a great night.
Take care.
Later.